String slicing is a pretty simple concept. It's not too hard to grasp, and it's pretty easy to do, actually. Actual uses for it might be a little bit more challenging to come up with right now, but it is a neat little trick that you can do, and it might come in handy eventually, depending on what you're trying to make. So let's look at what it is. So this is a string here, and if we want to talk about slicing the string, that's where we take just a certain part of it, or we print just a certain part. So even though this is my whole string, maybe I only want to print like this much of it, or maybe I just want this, or that, or the last letter, or the first letter. It's being able to take just part of that string and use it, or store it, or print it. So that's what string slicing is. It's pretty simple. I already have TextEdit open, and let's just declare a few variables so that way we can sort of play with them a little bit. I'm going to declare two variables, so let's go with person1 and person2, which will be Alice and Bob. I'm going to start with person2 because it's a little bit shorter. So the first way that I want to mention is how you can sort of break up that string into different individual variables. So like person2, Bob, is composed of 3 different characters, right? That's what creates that string. If we wanted to, we could say that we have character 1 and character 2 and character 3, and we could define these as person2, and what that will do is that will create these 3 variables, and it will drop one of those characters in that order into these new variables that we've just created. So if we run it, so we'll change directory to my desktop, and then we will run that file. So string slicing.py, and there we go. Oh, although we didn't print it, so right. So we can print person2 and print char1, and let's just copy and paste that 3 times, 2 times, and save and try again. Alright, so we printed person2, which is Bob, so Bob, and then char1, which is the B, 2, 3, 2, 3, so B-O-B. So it's splitting that up. Now what happens if we instead do this with person1? So if we use Alice, we told it to split this string across these 3 variables, but Alice is only 5 letters long. So how does Python 3 handle that? The thing is, it doesn't. It isn't sure what to do. And you could say, well, sure, of course, like 5 is not divisible by 3, so what if we add an exclamation point? And we try again. So it's not going to guess, even though it could very easily put the first 2 into the first one, the second 2 into the second one, the last 2 into the third one. It's not going to guess. The number of characters doesn't match the number of variables that we've declared, so it's just not going to. Now that being said, we don't have to do it this way. We can actually slice these up in the print command itself without having to declare another variable. So if we wanted to print out the different letters of Bob, we could declare the index values of each one. So if we run this, this should print that O. Now you might say, well, what about the B? Why aren't we using the B? So computers often start counting with 0. So this is the 0th index value, this is the first, this is the second. And if we want to confirm that, there we go, there is the O. So if we want to do all 3, zero, 1, 2, save. There you go. And it's okay if we don't hit all the index values in there because it's only pulling a certain index value. It's not having to split the number of characters in here across variables. It's just pulling whichever one is at that index value in the string. So if we save this and we run it, then we should get Ali. Yep. Now there's more that we can do with this. So instead of just declaring an individual index value, we can also declare a range. So we could say like 0 to 3, and this will print all of the index values starting from 0 up to 3. So if we run this, but it's going to do it all in one line. It won't split across the lines like we saw previously. So Ali. Because we started at the start, we don't actually have to declare 0. So 0 is the default. So if we cut 0 out and we run it again, it'll do the same thing. So by default, it's 0. If we wanted to skip that first one, and if we wanted to, if we don't define a value after this colon, then it will go to the end. So this should be lice, I guess. In addition, there's one more thing that we can do with this method of splicing. So we can also declare what we call a stride. So by default, the stride is 1. The stride is basically like, does it print every single letter, or does it like skip? If I put 2 here and I save and I run again, so we started at 1, which is here. We skipped to the C and we skipped to the exclamation point. So that's the stride. Now these values can also be negative as well. So instead of doing 1, I could do a -1, and this will print the negative first index value. So if I save and I clear and I run again, now we get the exclamation point. You might have expected the E because you might be saying like, well, doesn't start counting with 0, but how do you do a -0? So we don't really do it that way. So coming from the back end, we do actually start counting at -1 because 0, keep in mind, is up here on the front. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, -2, -3, so on. Now it doesn't really like using a range when you do negative. So like if I say I want to go from -1 to -3, I would expect it to go from, here, there, but that's not what's going to happen. So it just prints nothing. If we try to change this, maybe we do -3 to -1. Let's flip them. There we go. So keep in mind that the stride by default is 1, so it goes forward, right? So if you say -1 to -3, it's starting here and it's going, well, it can't go forward to -3. What if we try, I said these can be negative, so what if we do a negative stride? There you go. So that's more of what we were expecting, right? So -1, -2, up to -3. And we can, of course, change this to a larger number, like -6, and that should give us more of it. So almost the whole string. And if we want, we can leave these other spots blank, just like before, to get just the stride in effect. So now the whole string is backwards. Or we can have the whole string forward, but skipping by a certain stride, so maybe by 3. So the A, we skip 2, the C, and then we skip 2, and there's nothing left. So it's kind of a neat little thing that we can do with the print command. Now, it's not exclusive to just print. We can also store this as a variable. So if we flip this back to 2, we could call this every other letter, or whatever you want to call it. And then we could tell this to print every other letter. There you go, which happens to be just the vowels in this situation, but that's just coincidence. So that's string slicing using the index values.